Chapter 1 Moving In. Underworld. It would seem the weapon has appeared at last. A man dressed in all black sits on a throne chair. Large spikes pulling in on either side of him. Several gasps are heard throughout the room. Another voice states simply, eyes drawing to the second man. And what would you have us do? No doubt your brother covets the power it holds for himself. The blonde in the chair pinches the bridge of his nose in annoyance, casting his red gaze towards the speaker. He rests his head on his knuckles for several moments before answering. Ezra, you'll go to the human world and watch over it. Keep it safe. The raven-haired man tips his head to the side, mild confusion on display for just a moment. He narrows his eyes and pries. You simply want me to watch it this time? The last time it spawned, you had me do much more than watch it. He rises from his chair, the spikes receding into the ground, and states as he approaches the dark-haired vampire, placing a hand on his shoulder. Yes, well, these times humans don't believe we exist. We'll have to keep special attention on this generation's weapon. One of the council members asks timidly, My lord, shouldn't we just capture the weapon for ourselves before Lord Ryu does the same? After all, he destroys every weapon he gets hold of. He stands tall, hands on his hips, and he questions coolly. You do not trust my judgment, Serena? Serena fumbles with her black dress and counters. That isn't what I meant, my lord. Forgive me. I just worry that the weapon will fall to him again. His red eyes fall back to Ezra as he answers with a knowing look to the vampire. That will not happen so long as Ezra knows what he's doing. The man gives a small nod. Of course. I will keep an eye on it, my lord. With that, the blonde places his palm out beside Ezra. A portal opening for the man to walk through. Without a second thought, the plan is set into action as Ezra hops through and finds his new priority. Human world 20 years later. She shuffles the last of the boxes into the room and grins as she's finally got everything in the dorm room at last. You need anything else, Leila? She turns and shakes her head to the older woman. No, I think I'm all set, Mom. The graying blonde pulls the 20-year-old into a small hug, taking the moment to cherish her grown daughter. Leila smiles and embraces her mother back, stating after a few moments, You know I can always come home, yeah? It's only a 2-hour drive. Her mother releases her and swipes a tear from her eye, patting her arm. I know that. Just make sure you call sometimes. Leila nods and follows her out of the dormitory and back to the silver truck she had driven upstate for the move. Leila's own small car is parked beside the monstrosity, and she gives a faint wave to her mother as she climbs in the vehicle. She watches as it roars to life and soon pulls out of the lot. Once completely gone from her view, Leila exhales and heads back inside the building. She returns to her dorm room on the far east of the dormitory and slides her ID card into the lock. A resonating click sounding to let her know the door had unlocked. She glances around for a moment, finally taking in her new home. It's one of the nicer dorms. There's a full kitchen as soon as she walks in. The refrigerator sits to the left of the door. And then there's the plain white stove. Nice marble countertops and a small sink sit opposite of the stove and refrigerator. Cherrywood cabinets rest above the countertops, but there isn't much space in them. The living room combined with the kitchen is small, but Leila doubts she'd use it much. It's too small for anything like a party. A washer and dryer don't exist in the small space, but it did have 2 bedrooms and a private bathroom. Those 2 assets are what made her choose the more expensive dorm. Each bedroom sat side by side, but she didn't mind. Doors were made for a reason, and Leila would frequent that usage. She wants her privacy. Grasping the handle, she walks into her small room and looks at all the boxes and suitcases brought in by the volunteers and pinched the bridge of her nose. This is going to be a long process and she dreads it. She starts with her clothes. They would be the easiest to put away. She quickly stuffs them into the deep pocket dresser provided by the campus, and then places all the hangers in the closet. She makes her bed and that clears 2 suitcases. Leila stares at the remaining luggage to unpack and size, retreating to her comfy bed. A knock to her door makes her sigh internally. She was hoping to get a little bit of rest since she'd been up for the last 24 hours, panicking about the book she was still waiting to be delivered to the campus bookstore. Rising from her spot, she turns to the newcomer, her roommate. An abrupt hug and excited greeting assault her. Leila naturally tenses at the physical contact and laughs nervously. Ooh, nice to finally meet you, roomie. She is released from the hug, and a hand greets her next. Leila glances down at the appendage hesitantly but shakes the girl's hand. So what's there to do here? My name's Haley and I'm a freshman. What about you? Is this your first year too? Oh, I'm so glad to be free from home. What? Leila's face contorts into an expression of confusion, and slowly to one of mirth. What a peculiar roommate, echoes her first thought. She covers her mouth in an effort to stifle her laughter and answers, my name is Leila. I'm a second year and there's plenty to do. But since you're a freshman you have orientation and the preview program all weekend. Her joyful expression fell. What? No. I wanted to talk with you more. Leila smiles and snags her student ID while showing Haley to her freshman program taking place at the amphitheater, saying, preview isn't bad. It's pretty fun actually. I did it last year. There's dancing, partying, hypnotizing and some more stuff. Go enjoy it. I have errands to take care of, and I'll be at the dorm later. Before the girl could object, Leila makes a left turn and goes straight for the bookstore inside the university center of the campus. Even if most of her books aren't there yet, she needs to get a few supplies while she had the time. Chapter 2 Bonfire Meeting. She passes by the food court and almost salivates from hunger. The growling from her stomach makes her look down, and she places a hand over it, attempting to ease the noise and muttering, sure I'll feed you soon. I gotta get stuff first. She looks up and charges into the bookstore, approaching one of the open registers with a purpose. An older man, beginning to bald and with blue eyes, stares at her inquisitively. How may I help you today? I need to check on the status of my books. This is the order number. She pulls a piece of paper from her pants pocket and hands the receipt with the order number over to the man. He types in some information, pulling the status of her books up quickly. Well, it looks like we have a few of the books, but there's one set of 6 books still not here yet. Do you want to pick up the first half of the order now? She gives a firm nod. The cashier has her wait for a few moments as he trots to gather Leila's books, returning with a box of books too heavy for her to carry alone. Staring at the box, she asks, are there really that many books? Well, it's a package of books, and the records show that this box is for you. She groans internally, giving the man a half attempt for a smile, and hefts the small, but heavy box of books from the counter. The further she walks though, the more the box slowly begins to make its way towards the ground. Leila definitely isn't the strongest girl around. She stops just outside of the store and hoists the box so that it would better fit in her arms, but now her field of vision is blocked. Exasperated with the ordeal, she decides to head to her dorm as fast as she's able before she just completely drops the thing. Leila? Is that you? She pauses as she reaches the exit of the building, looking for the voice. A figure is approaching from her left. Turning and stepping to the side to keep from blocking the pathway, she barely makes out the face of her new roommate. Leila, it's just me and holy hell. Are those all your books for this semester? Come. Set him down on the ground. Haley. She could only imagination the expression on the freshman's face and shamefully answers, I can't. What? Why not? Just drop him right here. I won't be able to pick them up again if I set them down now. A loud laugh escapes her. Leila frowns and casts her eyes to the side to try and glare at the girl, but this only furthers her laughter until the older one gives in as her arms scream for liberation, and the box of books collides to the dirty floor of the common gathering area for many students. She'd think about the germs later. The relieved expression says it all. Haley grins. We can always get a guy to help us, right? Her cheeks flush in embarrassment. No. 2 can get it by myself. Haley snickers and points at her accusingly. I bet you've never had a boyfriend. Are you that awkward around guys? Wait. Are you a lesbian? She nearly chokes at the lattermost option. While the thought has crossed her mind once or twice, she was not a homosexual, and she blurts to further correct the girl. I much prefer the D. Now that I think about it, that technically means you're a virgin, right? How would you know if you prefer dick over pussy if you've never sampled it? Leila's face flushes further. She quickly whisks her box of books up and starts walking to the dorm as fast as she can. Haley trails her step for step and giggles behind her like a schoolgirl all the way. Neither pays attention to their surroundings, and Leila bumps into an object. She thinks it's a wall at first with the way it just stands still as if never being touched, but a smooth voice responds, apologies. There's a pause and it continues a moment later. Do you need some assistance? Leila's face can't show any more signs of embarrassment. She sets the box down once more and gives a head bow. I'm so sorry. I wasn't paying attention to where I was going. She finally looks at him and is taken aback by his appearance, mainly his amethyst-colored eyes. He seems vaguely familiar to her, but she can't figure out why. Tilting her head to the side with furrowed brows, she mutters to herself, I swear you look so familiar. She shakes her head though and states aloud, sorry for running into you. He smiles lightly, flashing his pearly whites. It's quite all right. Standing there awkwardly for several moments, she finally states, we should probably get going. Right, Haley? Yeah, we've gotta go grocery shopping. She takes the lead and Leila follows behind her. She can't help but to take a glance back at the guy, his raven locks fading in the distance as the two girls exit the building and continue down the sidewalk towards their dorm. His purple eyes meet her honey brown ones, and she quickly casts her gaze back on the set of books she's holding. Haley snickers beside her, and if she could, Leila would elbow the young freshman. Haley speaks up as she slides her student ID into the outer door. He was cute. Leila doesn't acknowledge the bait and continues to the room. Once they get back to the mini apartment, Leila drops the box inside and grabs her car keys, stating, "All right, grocery time." Haley gives a thumbs up to the woman and snatches up her own wallet, leaving the room with Leila in the lead. They get to Leila's four-door sedan and hop inside. The car revs to life and they're off to the store. When they return from their trip, Leila helps put the groceries away and then collapses on the couch face first. Haley giggles and comments, "You can't be tired yet. There's a party going on, and I don't want to go by myself." The older roommate narrows her eyes and responds, dragging her eyes to the blonde, "You go. I have to study microbiology." She puffs her lower lip in a pout and retorts, grabbing Leila's hand and pulling her to her feet. "Come on, just for a little bit. It'll be fun." Leila's lips tighten and Haley quickly responds to further encourage the woman, "I bet that guy will be there." Her cheeks redden. "That's all the more reason to not go." Haley shakes her head. "Tisk tsk. Obviously I won't make you go, but I'm going. You're going to miss out on a bunch of hot guys." Leila rolls her eyes but speaks up, "If I come, it won't be until later. Go have fun, lady." The young freshman gives a small wave and leaves the room seconds later, giving Leila some time to herself. She exhales and grabs a small snack from the cabinet before heading into her room and collapsing in bed. She kicks her shoes off and switches on the TV and game system she had brought from home. She scrolls over to the music on her game system, and hits the play button. Music blares from the TV, and she sings along to the songs as she thinks, did she bother with going out that night? Leila climbs out of bed and peeks out the blinds. A bonfire is seen brightly raging from her spot indoors with students running around in excitement. She sighs. What if she did come across that man? She could just very well ignore him, but what if he spoke to her? Leila shakes her head. Turning the electronics off, she places a hand to her chest, muttering, "It's just a party. You can go check things out and then come back." She nods as she convinces herself of the plan and grabs her wallet. Slipping back into her shoes, she leaves the room and makes her way to the celebration outside. Her honeyed eyes scan over the crowd for any familiar faces, but a sigh escapes her as she can't find Haley amongst the bodies. Finding a spot off to the side, she plops to the ground and pulls her knees to her chest, gazing at the large fire. Is this seat taken? She looks to the newcomer and nearly chokes on her saliva as she recognizes the man instantly. She'd nearly taken him out with her books. How could she forget? Her anxiety wouldn't allow it. Leila shakes her head rapidly, answering his question, and he settles down beside her. Her eyes glance over at him for a moment, and he's staring at her. She inches further away from him and questions, "What is it?" Chapter 3 Professor. "Your eyes are interesting." Leila blushes and replies while staring at the grass, avoiding further eye contact. "Are you hitting on me? You're the one with purple eyes." The strange man chuckles and answers, "No, just taking note." "Ezra, there you are." A student calls out, garnering the man's attention. He gives a small smile and responds as the student breathlessly reaches him, "I was just having a discussion with Miss." He tips his head to the side waiting for her answer. She quickly looks up, answering, "Oh, I'm Leila." The student shakes his head and states, "Well, you've been nominated for the talent show. The girls heard about your violin skills, and now they're forcing you into the program." He pinches the bridge of his nose, seemingly in frustration, and Leila's ears perk up at the mention of the instrument. She asks softly, "You play the violin?" His eyes wander over to hers and he nods. "Yes, I'm an instructor for it as well." Her eyes light up and she urges, "You should play a piece for the show then. Shouldn't be too hard." Ezra gives her a dry smile. "I'd much rather watch the show, not be a part of it. It's meant for the students." He focuses on the male who had approached him and states, "Tell them no." The male runs a hand through his brown locks and counters, "You know the girls are going to hate this. If they want to listen to me play, they can come to a showing or take the course." He responds matter-of-factly. Leila asks with a small grin, "Then I'll get to see you play?" He casts her a sharp gaze, questioning, "Are you in my class?" Every Monday and Wednesday night for the semester, yes. Nice to meet you, Professor Ezra. He balks at the title and states, please just call me Ezra. Leila leans back into the grass, feeling much more at ease and replies, sure thing. The dark-skinned student waiting for Ezra speaks up. So then it's definitely a no? I don't want to disappoint those girls. They'll hang me. Ezra chuckles. Surely not. He points to the crowd, Leila's eyes following his finger to a larger group of women watching the trio, and she comments, wow, you've got a cult. He really does. The student agrees. He questions, so it's definite no? Ezra sighs and leans back onto the grass. It's a no, Mike. He gives a two-fingered salute to the pale man and walks off towards the group of anxiously waiting girls. Leila watches as the scene unfolds from afar. Mike's shoulders fall as he explains to the girls the situation, and several of them storm off. Leila can't help but laugh to herself at the scenario. Ezra glances at her and asks, you aren't the cult-gathering type, are you? She places a hand to her chest, feeling offended, and quips, do I look like I enjoy that sort of thing? He sits up, looking her up and down, and with a small chuckle he answers, no, you don't seem the type. She smiles at him and silence falls between the two. Leila gazes out at the crowd. The students partying seemed like they were having so much fun. A piece of her wants to join in on the festivities, but she's much too shy. Instead, she just watches from afar until a familiar face pops up amongst the bodies and rushes towards her. Excitement is plainly written across the young woman's face. Mirth fills Leila's eyes, and she asks as Haley finally gets within hearing range, having fun, I assume? Haley nods her head vigorously. I'm having a blast, and you finally came outside. She notices Ezra beside her, and her eyebrows raise in curiosity as a grin spreads across her face. Looks like you've even made a friend. Leila inhales sharply. This is Ezra, and he's the professor for the violin course I'm taking. Haley's eyes light up as curiosity radiates from her. She plops down beside the man and asks at 1,000,000 miles per minute, you play the violin? Are you any good? You'd have to be to teach a class, right? He chuckles at her enthusiasm and replies smoothly, I do, and I'd like to think that I play it quite well. If you'd like to see and judge for yourself, I'm performing later this week in the Ball Hall Music Auditorium. Ezra stands and stretches, muscles rippling beneath his black top, and states as he bids farewell to the women, ladies, I must go. I have lesson planning to tend to before classes start. You two have a good night, and Leila? She meets his gaze. Stay safe. Her heart skips a beat at the tone in those words, but she gives it little thought, believing it to be her anxiety as per usual, and she watches as he fades into the throng of students before completely vanishing from sight. Haley releases a cheeky grin and states towards Leila, you have my approval. Her cheeks redden and she stutters, two don't need your approval. We aren't dating. But you could be, she responds in a sing-song voice. Leila huffs and counters, we've only known each other for an hour at most. People hook up knowing each other for less time. She exhales noisily in frustration, emphasizing, but I'm not one of those people, Haley. There's no way I'm hooking up with a stranger. She nudges her shoulder. But you won't be strangers for long. Leila narrows her eyes at the insinuation and responds blankly, you're very determined for whatever reason. You need a man or woman in your life. She can't help the depressed sigh that escapes her mouth. I really don't need a relationship in my life right now. Maybe in a few years or something when I'm out of school. Girl, you need to explore. This is the perfect place for it. Leila rolls her eyes. You're starting to sound like a mother. Haley giggles. Maybe, but really though, you should explore a bit. Leila stands and stretches her arms. She states lightly, all right, I got it, Mom. I'll keep it in mind. You really should. What are you going to do now? She pulls out her wallet and replies as she begins walking towards the dormitory, I'm going to bed. We have classes tomorrow. I don't want to be late on the first day. Haley puts a finger to her chin, thinking, and finally nods in agreement, following the woman into the building not far from the party. Once they arrive at their dorm, Leila rushes to her bedroom and collapses on the bed, kicking her shoes off in the process. She shouts into the small hallway just before Haley enters her own room for the evening. Good night, roomie. A small giggle resonates throughout the mini apartment, and she returns, good night, Leila. The brunette turns over in her bed and sighs. Tomorrow is going to be a long day. With that final spoken thought, she closes her eyes and drifts off into a fitful sleep. Chapter 4. Microbiology Failure. The alarm blares loudly, jogging Leila to life. She rolls over to the side and reaches for the offending object, gazing at the time as she wipes the sleep away from her eyes. 0730. She has 30 minutes to get ready for class. Leila rolls out of bed and pulls out the first pair of pants and shirt she grabs from her large capacity dresser. Rushing to the bathroom, she jumps in the shower and begins the ritual process of scrubbing herself down. Thoughts race through her mind as she cleanses herself. Her nerves would get the better of her. She can feel it. She's always anxious on the first day of the semester. It doesn't help that she spent the previous night outdoors instead of planning ahead. She exhales. Everything is going to be all right, she chants to herself before stepping out of the shower. Leila dries herself off hurriedly and ponders the classes she has for the day. Her first class is microbiology and then relaxation for stress management, which she decided to take on a whim that it would somehow help her find a way to calm her nerves. Her final class is violin 1. She would relearn the basics of the violin and potentially get back into a hobby she once enjoyed. Of course, that class didn't happen until much later on in the evening, so she has plenty of time to think about it later. She throws on her clothes and brushes her long hair, glancing at her phone's clock once more. 0755. Right on time. She slips on her shoes and grabs her backpack, shoving books and school supplies into it haphazardly. She glances at herself in the bathroom mirror as she passes by. She's presentable. That's all that matters. Haley is in the kitchenette making coffee and turns to the brunette, holding out a cup. Want some before you go? Leila shakes her head. No thanks. I gotta get going and I don't like the taste. Have a good day, Haley. She nods her head, taking a sip from the mug as Leila leaves the room. She snatches her student ID up and shoves it into her wallet next before leaving the room. Forgetting the thing was a bad habit she had the last year, and she didn't want to repeat it. After her double check, she leaves the mini apartment, the door slamming shut and locked behind her. Leila makes haste for her first class across the campus. She passes by several large buildings, but none of them are the one she's looking for. When she finally comes to the square edifice she is in search of, she rushes in the doors behind a cascade of hurrying students. Climbing 3 flights of steps, she comes to her stop and pushes through the first entryway of the ball hall, and an immediate right turn follows as she enters the classroom and finds a spot in the back. She's breathless as she takes a seat and pulls out several materials for microbiology. She's ready for class and with 5 minutes to spare. Is this seat taken? She perks up at the familiar voice, and Ezra is standing there, gesturing to the desk beside her. She rapidly shakes her head, answers, only if ghosts are there. He chuckles and settles down next to her. Leila watches as he takes out materials for the class and asks, I thought you were a teacher. What are you doing here? I am, and I enjoy many hobbies. She narrows her eyes and states with a wry smile, I'd hardly call microbiology a side hobby. He laughs lightly. It has some interesting qualities to it, I assure you. The professor comes in moments later as the two fall into a comfortable silence, and he announces, everyone get settled. I have your first quiz for the semester, so I hope you did the assigned readings. Leila's eyes widen. She had forgotten to do the assignment last night and internally cries at the situation. How could she pass a quiz if she hadn't done the homework? The professor reaches her and Ezra and hands over 2 sheets of paper, one for her and the other for him. She stares at all the words before her with blank eyes, giving the questions a once-over. She can hear the quiet scribbling of the other students, and anxiety bubbles within her. Leila takes a pencil out from her backpack and begins jotting her own answers down, hopeful that she'll at least come close to passing. All right, time's up. The professor calls out. Leila internally glares at the piece of paper before her, only having half the answers filled out. The older man comes by and picks up all the quizzes and sets them on the podium he would be lecturing from. Words begin to flow from his mouth, but Leila hardly pays any attention to the lesson. All that she can think about is how she failed her first quiz of the semester. How am I supposed to make that up? She questions in her head. A light tap comes to her arm, and she glances over at the man beside her. He gives her a reassuring smile, and she blushes in embarrassment, diverting her eyes to the desk in front of her. The least she can do is take notes, so she pulls out paper and begins writing verbatim what the man is saying. She would comprehend it later. An hour and a half of lecturing goes by, and Leila feels her eyes drooping closed with boredom. Ezra nudges her awake and chuckles as she startles at the touch. Class is done, Leila. She bobs her head tiredly and gathers her things. While she does this, Ezra is swarmed by curious females, and Leila can't help but roll her eyes. Not only are they invading his space but hers as well, and this she did not like one bit. Ezra, I didn't know you were taking this class. You could have sat by me. One of the girls whines. Leila feels bad for the man as he stands with his hands held up to the female population, answering, "It's good to see you as well, Amber." A cough sounds from the girl and she mutters under her breath, "Liar." Before she can leave, she feels his hand snatch hers from below the desk, and she looks to the appendage in confusion. She wraps her hand around his in the next moment and states, "Sorry girls, I've got to borrow the professor for a bit." Glares fall upon her, but she shoots them an equally challenging stare. She would not be bullied by a bunch of jealous women, and Leila pulls Ezra from the crowd, releasing his hand once they reach the outside of the science building. "Thank you." Leila giggles into her hand and states, "I can't believe you're frightened of a bunch of girls. If you tell them no, they wouldn't be so insistent." He rotates the woman to face him and leans in close, lips hovering over hers, startling her and replying, "Fear does not strike me with those women, Leila." Her tan face reddens and she quickly stammers, pulling from his hold, Sure. Chapter 5, Stress Management. "Would you like to get lunch?" he remarks, still close to her. Her face darkens and she questions, "You mean like a date?" He chuckles. "No, don't worry. I won't force that on you." A relieved sigh escapes her, and she answers as her anxiety simmers, "Yeah, we can get lunch, but then I have another class to go to." He nods in understanding and gestures for her to lead the way. Making her way down the street and towards the large Culp Center, she takes the ramp leading to the second floor. Shyly she opens the door, holding it for him, but he reaches above her and holds it for her to walk through first. She enters the building and heads immediately towards her favorite sandwich shop. The line is long and gathering outside the entryway, but she doesn't mind. The food is worth it to her. Once her turn comes up, she's greeted by the first worker with familiarity. "What's it gonna be today, sweetie? Large or small?" She puts a finger to her chin in thought and replies a moment later, "Small today. How are you doing?" "Girl, it's the same as always. Busy 24/7. What can I get you, sir?" Ezra orders a small meatball sub, and Leila continues her chatter with the worker as she picks the toppings for her sandwich. "You're a rabbit, I swear. Do you even want the chicken on the sandwich, sweetheart?" Leila laughs and responds as she pays for her food, followed by Ezra, "Just the smallest bit." After paying, she finds a quiet table away from the crowd and takes a seat, waiting for the man before having her food. He sits beside her and smiles. "What is it?" she asks as she takes a bite of her sub. He places a hand to his chin and questions, "How'd you do on the quiz?" Leila's jaw tightens as she snaps her mouth shut. "That bad, huh?" She groans, laying her head on the table. "I only answered half the questions. I'm failing the course and it just started." Ezra doesn't say anything to combat her words. She peeks up at the man and asks weakly, "Do you think you could tutor me? I know you have other things to tend to like the violin course and your own work." He places a finger to her lips. "Of course, Leila." She blushes, embarrassed by his action and her stammering. Leila pulls away from his hand and mumbles, "Thanks. I should probably head to my next class." He leans back in his chair. "I'll see you tonight then?" Leila nods in agreement and gathers her trash, throwing it away and meeting Ezra's lingering amethyst gaze. Her cheeks redden further, and she quickly looks away, scampering off to her next class, Stress and Relaxation Management. As she arrives at the large dome-shaped building, she struggles with getting inside, following several students around a corner since the front doors are locked. "Okay, 321A. She repeats the number in her head. She doesn't want to forget as she's searching the nameplates for each room listed in the long hallway. Leila finally comes across the gym she's looking for and walks in. Students are standing there with their bags off to the side. Leila sets her backpack down as well and lines up with her pupils as the coach comes inside and introduces herself. She pulls up a video on yoga workouts and states, "Along with these exercises, you'll need to keep a daily journal of your day like a diary. I'll be reading and grading these every week. Now find a partner to do today's program with." No one says a word, but eyes wander about the room, meeting gazes. Leila refuses eye contact with anyone until she's the last one standing. The teacher walks up to her and responds with a smile, "Looks like we'll be partners." Leila gives a slow nod, and the class begins their exercises, following along with the video. The first pose is a basic stretch focusing on the hamstrings. Leila feels her body cringe at the stretch and mutters to herself, "Why did I take this class?" The class continues on with exercises focusing on different muscle groups, until the last 45 minutes of session. The teacher stops the tape and hands a mat to Leila. She stares at it in confusion. Lastly, meditation is good for the body and mind. Everyone grab a mat. Students do as told, reaching for the mats and passing them down to one another until everyone has one. A video of an ocean and music playing in the background starts next, and the professor states with a grin, "Follow along with the video." Leila frowns as she settles onto her mat and lies back as instructed. She exhales slowly and tries to calm her mind. This is the first opportunity she's had to think about things, and she doesn't enjoy it. She tries to silence her mind, closing her eyes, attempting to still her thoughts, but Ezra invades her mind. He was a handsome man, but he was her professor. He seemed kind enough, and his eyes, they pierced through her soul when she met his gaze straight on. She shakes her head. Anything with him would be taboo. The thought echoes in her mind. Did she want something with him? Her cheeks redden as she rolls to her other side and continues pondering. She sighs quietly and lies there in silence, cursing her thoughts as they pop up in her mind. Anything and everything that could distract her from the present exercise for the class did. Frustration builds up in her, and the only thing she wants is to leave. The music and oceanic noises stop. Leila sits up rapidly, dizziness overcoming her, but she shakes her head a few times before standing. Folding her mat, she returns it to the pile where other students were laying their makeshift beds and gathers her things since the class is over. She makes haste out of the room and heads back to her dorm. She didn't want to talk to anyone. As soon as she arrives at the dormitory, she goes to her room, throwing her backpack to the side and collapsing in bed. The sound of a door opening resonates throughout the mini apartment, and she hears footsteps coming her way. "Rough day?" Haley asks, leaning against the door frame. She jumps to her feet and points accusingly at the blonde. "This is your fault. You put thoughts there and now." She tips her head to the side in confusion. "What are you talking about?" "Ezra. I have his class tonight, and you've buried thoughts in my brain." She grins, eyebrows wiggling as she asks, "Oh, you like him? We can get you set up with him for sure." Leila whines, "No, that's not what I want." Haley hugs the girl and replies while squeezing her shoulders, "We could go out tonight then? Skip the first day." She shakes her head. "No. I said I would be there. Maybe afterwards though." Haley jumps in excitement, startling Leila. "Woo, I've got a cool roommate." Leila sighs and responds with reluctance, Yes. Now let me sleep off my stress." Haley pulls out her phone and states as she scrolls through it, "Sure thing, but first, I need a picture of you for my contact info." Leila grimaces. "I really don't think that's a good idea." Haley frowns and questions, "It'll be quick." Leila sighs and twiddles her thumbs, answering with downcast eyes, "Because things pop up in them. They aren't exactly pretty." The younger woman places a hand on her hip and asks, "What do you mean by things? You talking like ghosts?" She meets her hazel gaze and replies, "Just creepy things." "Well, now I want to see." Leila's eyes widen as Haley quickly points the phone at her and snaps a photo of the woman. She scowls and quips, "Would you not do that?" Haley shakes her head and replies while looking over the image, "It's just an orb. You know? Wanna see? I've had one in my pictures before. Think it's my grandmother." She counters swiftly, glancing over her shoulder for a moment, "I doubt that's the case." Haley replies with a shrug, "Either way, it's not as creepy as you made it seem." Leila shakes her head, not wanting anything to do with the supernatural occurrence, and crawls back into her bed. She curls up under her warm comforter and responds with a yawn, "I'm going to rest until my last class." Haley nods her head. "All right." She shuts the door, leaving the older female to her nap. Leila rolls onto her side and sighs. She knew what the image would entail. She's been haunted ever since she was a child. She ignores the entities, though, and refuses to give them any of her time. Chapter 6. Violin Lesson. A loud blaring noise startles the woman awake, and Leila rolls over, nearly falling from the bed as she reaches for the phone to turn the alarm off. She climbs out of bed sleepily, rubbing her eyes to wake up, and slips on her shoes. She grabs a light jacket for the evening and throws her long hair up into a messy bun. Leila snatches her backpack up and double-checks for student ID. Once ready, she leaves the silent. Haley must have gone to classes, she mutters as she exits the darkened room. It's a 5-minute walk to the ball hall where all the music and language arts classes are held. She makes it to the class with minutes to spare and finds a seat at the back of the room. Several students, mostly female, join Leila in the classroom. Glares are passed around between each of the women. One of the girls waltz up to Leila and states, You're that girl who was hogging Professor Ezra last night at the bonfire." Eyes fall to her. She feels the envious glares piercing through her and replies nonchalantly, "I didn't know he was an object." The redhead before her snips angrily, I bet you can't even play the violin and signed up just for him. She rolls her eyes and quips. Are we in high school, or did I get lost somewhere? Could have sworn I enrolled into a university full of semi-mature adults. The redhead scowls and snaps. You best stay away from him. Leila retorts in annoyance. I'm literally in his class. Shut up and go take a seat. She scoffs but goes to find her own spot directly in front of Leila. Ezra comes into the room moments later and scans the class, his eyes falling on Leila and holding her gaze. He gives her a light smirk before turning away, causing her cheeks to heat up. Leila focuses her eyes on the table in front of her, trying to maintain her calm. Why did he have to do that? She hisses in a whisper only heard by her, or so she thought. She notices Ezra chuckling quietly to himself before he begins taking the role. Her eyes narrow. Had he heard her or was he just laughing in general? She isn't about to ask him though. Leila. Here. His eyes meet her honey brown ones once more as she answers him, and he asks, diverting his attention to the class as a whole, has anyone had any previous experience on the violin? No one dares to raise a hand. Leila is hesitant with her response but decides on leaving her hand down until Ezra approaches her with a raised brow. He asks once more. Anyone? She narrows her eyes at him and refuses to raise her hand. He turns away from her and replies, all right, let's get started then, shall we? He begins by explaining the parts of the violin. This is something she knows about from previous years of experience with the instrument, but she doesn't want to speak up on it. Instead, she focuses on listening intently to the lesson until Ezra pulls out a violin. Everyone watches in anticipation, waiting for the man to play the instrument, but he turns towards Leila then. He asks politely, holding the bow out to her. Care to give it a try? Eyes fall to her as he holds the instrument out for her to take. There's no denying her blush as she meets his knowing gaze. She quickly searches for a way out of the situation and replies, I really can't. Then you can be the demonstration. He holds his hand out expectantly. She internally screams but stands from her spot and grasps his hand. He pulls her to him, her cheeks on fire and her heart ready to burst. Ezra places the violin where it's supposed to rest between the shoulder and neck. Taking her right hand in his, he settles the bow there, careful not to touch the hairs. Her fingers wrap around it in proper placement as she tries to focus on anything, but the muscles she can feel pressing against her back. He guides her hand with the bow to rest on the strings of the violin. He smells of lavender and leans in close to her face, responding as he turns her towards the class. This is how you'll hold your instruments when you get them. The redhead, Megan, asks with a small coo to her tone. Are you going to show us all how to properly hold it, Professor Ezra? He dryly states while releasing Leila, much to her relief. I just have, so remember it. The pout on Megan's face is plain for everyone to see. Leila stands there with the instrument in one hand and the bow in the other. She holds them out to Ezra and states, You'll probably need these back. He smiles gently and counters, They're yours for the semester. Take care of them. Leila frowns but nods her head. She shuffles back to her seat, moving behind Megan, who gives her a dirty look, but Leila pays it little attention. That's not what her mind is focused on. The rest of the class goes by smoothly, Ezra sizing each student to a properly fitted violin, and teaching the first musical scale they would all learn and be tested on in the next week. Leila sighs internally, not excited for the quiz. She didn't want to blow it in front of her clearly jealous classmates. When the class comes to an end, Leila is the last to leave. She hears Ezra question, Why didn't you play earlier? She answers shyly, I'm out of practice. The firmness in your hands earlier say otherwise. Leila's cheeks redden and she responds, changing the subject, I have to meet Haley. Ezra nods and states, I won't hold you here. Stay safe, Leila. Every time he says her name it sends shivers down her spine, and this time is no different. Before he can notice her odd behavior, she packs the violin and rushes out of the space. She hurries to the dorm and finds Haley getting ready, dresses thrown about the floor as she picks an outfit for the night. Oh, you're back. Leila bobs her head slowly and sets her things down in her room. She states calmly, All right, I'm ready. Haley scans Leila up and down and frowns. She blurts, You aren't going out like that. Come on, come try something on. She hesitates, but Haley snatches her hand and pulls her into her room, throwing a short black dress at her. Leila tries it on and immediately frowns at herself in the single off-shoulder piece. She can feel her nakedness in the dress and speaks up. This isn't going to work. Haley replies as she examines her. You look great though. Leila does what she can to hide her legs, and Haley exhales noisily. Fine, fine. How about some leggings and a simple off-shoulder shirt with lots of accessories? She nods her head, answering, as long as I don't feel exposed. Haley tosses her a pair of solid black leggings and a white one-side off-shoulder top. Leila lets her hair loose, and Haley hands her several pieces of gold jewelry. Leila sighs as she puts it all on and stares at herself in the bathroom mirror directly across from Haley's small room. Leila takes a brush to her pencil straight locks and exhales once more. Maybe getting out would help her relax. Haley places her hands on Leila's shoulders in excitement. Look at you, hot lady. Leila blushes and quickly counters, I'm not. Haley holds up a pair of black, stiletto heels and hands them to the older roommate. Leila's eyes narrow as she looks at the spiked heels, and she states matter-of-factly, I'm going to break my ankles in those. Haley giggles and replies, do you have any good-looking shoes then? Leila goes to her room and pulls out a pair of black boots. She shows them to Haley, who nods her approval. Giving a once-over of Haley, Leila feels plain, but she isn't into provocative clothing like Haley. She wears a short, blue dress with a slit in the chest revealing some of her cleaving. It stops just below her bottom, and she has on a pair of black stilettos. Her hair is pulled up into a high ponytail, and she wears a pair of silver earrings and a necklace to match the look. Haley asks with excitement, ready? Leila nods her head. As ready as I'm going to be. Chapter 7 Nightlife. They arrive at the small club, and a line is wrapped around the building. Leila's eye twitches in annoyance and she asks as Haley drags her to the line. Why is it so busy on a Monday? Because we love to party. Leila shrugs, retorting, you mean you like to party? Haley grins widely, and they soon come up to the entrance of Capone's. The bouncer scans the two girls and questions, driver's licenses, ladies. They both hand them over to the tall man, and he holds out a stamp for them. Leila holds her hand out along with Haley, and the image of the number 21 with a slash through it appears on top of their hands. Haley scowls at the mark, but Leila smiles as the bouncer lets them through. People are dancing to loud hip-hop and R&B music, and Leila immediately makes her way to the bar and finds a seat. Haley follows her and asks, you're not gonna sit here all night, are you? She admits calmly, I'm not a dancer. You have fun. I'll people watch. Haley puffs her cheeks in disappointment but nods in understanding nonetheless. She turns and walks out to the crowded dance floor. Leila surveys the room, humming with the music as it blares throughout the building. A tap comes to her shoulder. She looks over and sees a man grinning at her. He speaks. Wanna dance, lil mama? For a moment the words don't process because of the music blasting overhead, but she promptly answers, no thanks. He tries once more. Let me at least get you a drink. She sours at the thought and shakes her head, politely answering, no thank you. She holds her hand up for emphasis, showing off the stamp that would refuse her alcohol, and the man frowns. This seems to get him to leave and he wanders off. Leila watches as he makes his way to the dance floor, asking other women to dance and ultimately being told no. She shakes her head at the situation and drags her attention back to Haley, who is having a blast dancing with several guys at the ready to partner with her. She turns back to the bar she's sitting at and orders water. Her fingers drum against the countertop, and a voice beside her startles her. Yo, you wanna dance? She glances over at the man and shakes her head. He questions once more. Don't you wanna have some fun, babe? Leila scowls, turning to him. First, I'm not your babe, and second, not with a creep like you know, so piss off. He holds his hands up defensively. You're missing out on a good time. She mutters into her glass as she takes another sip. And probably a case of chlamydia. What was that? He asks. Leila scowls. Go away. Before he can utter another word, Haley prances up to the duo and slings an arm around Leila. Hey babe, what's up? Her cheeks redden, but she plays along and states pointedly towards the man still standing there. Nothing at all. He grins and replies, that's okay. I can handle two ladies. Haley frowns and snaps. Piss off, you ass. No one wants you. Turning to Leila next, she takes her hand and states while dragging her towards the exit. I'm done anyways. We can go if you want. Leila is relieved by that statement, and follows behind the girl. They leave the club and Leila asks with a small smile, did you enjoy your time? Haley nods. Yeah, I'm really worn out after all that dancing. How long were we there? Leila pulls out her phone as they enter the parking lot. Only about an hour and a half. Hey, wait up, ladies. A groan escapes Leila and Haley quickly spits out. Just keep walking. Guy's a creep. Before they can get farther, a hand snatches Leila's wrist and spins her to face the man she had rejected minutes ago. She quickly snaps as she tries to pull away, having little success. Let go of me. He reaches a tan hand for her face, but she turns her head in refusal of his touch. She focuses her attention on Haley, who is being held by another stranger. She struggles in his grasp but refuses to let go. Leila glares at the man before her. What the hell do you want? He smirks, placing a finger on her lips. I've already told you. I want a good time. She immediately counters, coldness dripping in her tone. Let go. His smirk broadens into a grin and he responds, or else what, little lady? Her free hand curls into a fist, and she reels back, throwing a punch to the stranger's throat. He releases her, choking and gasping for air, and she kicks the goon holding Haley in the groin, forcing him to let her go. Leila takes the younger woman's hand and jerks her forward as they flee from the scene. An angry yell comes from behind them but neither looks back. They didn't want to. Do you remember where you parked? She frantically asks. Haley shakes her head, answering in short bursts. Hard to think about when we're running from a couple of creeps. Leila pulls Haley to the ground behind a silver car to hide and catch their breaths. She can hear their footsteps against the pavement as they search for the two girls. Ladies, come out now. She hears him coo. Haley's eyes widen at the closeness and proximity, and Leila puts a finger to her lips. She whispers, get back to the car. I'll distract them. Before Haley can make a retort, Leila jumps to her feet and shouts towards the men. Come at me, you fucking pricks. She bolts as they turn towards her, charging for her frame. She runs through the parking lot to an open path leading to a local park. Her lungs burn, but she can hear the two behind her with their heavy footsteps. The wind is stolen from her when she is tackled to the ground by a third form. She throws her fists blindly at the man on top of her. He scowls, slapping her across the face hard enough to bust her lip. She ignores the pain, swinging wildly as the other two men catch up and hold her arms down. She's a wild one. One clad in a red and black plaid shirt speaks. He's the one holding most of her down. The man who had asked her to dance brushes a hand through her hair. Yeah, she'll be a fun ride. Panic snares her mind, and she tries furiously to flail about. She wouldn't let these men have her. The lead of the trio leans into her lips and goes for a kiss, but she bites him, causing him to reel back angrily. He glares at her, and she opens her mouth, releasing an ear-piercing, high-pitched scream. Hands cover her mouth, but a cold voice catches them all off guard. Release her. Everyone looks to the figure, and Leila's body eases in tension at the newcomers. Haley has Ezra with her. She assumes she went and found help before searching for her car. And for that, Leila is grateful. The hold that once was forced upon Leila is gone as the three men turn their attention to Ezra. His normally content eyes are full of rage, glowing brightly in the night. And what exactly are you gonna do, bud? He takes a menacing step forward. Leila shivers. For some reason, the temperature seems to have dropped, and the men hesitate with their next actions. One charges forward and the rest follow. Ezra throws the men aside like rag dolls and scoops Leila into his arms. The three men stand up and charge him once again. Ezra kicks one in the head, jumping back with Leila still in his arms. He then strikes a second one in the chest, and the third he trips and pins him down with his foot. He holds the man there with his boot and states, ice in his voice, I should kill you, scum. He struggles under Ezra's hold, and Leila replies quietly, resting her head on his chest, I want to go. He nods his head, pulling her tight to him and releases the man beneath his boot, snapping, Go before I change my mind. Without another word, they flee the scene, Ezra's imposing and cold aura frightening them. Ezra turns to Haley and questions, eyes flickering red. Are you injured? No, but your eyes. You. He blinks and states, Don't worry about it. Come, I'll take you to my home. Chapter 8, An Odd Dream. Ezra brings the two women to a small manor via his car. He helps Leila out of the vehicle and states while gazing at her bleeding lip, We need to fix this. Leila stares at the building before them and asks, This is your home? We shouldn't be here. He sighs, answering as he guides them both inside, I can't very well take you to your dorm after what just happened. Haley speaks up. It's probably safer with Ezra than being at the dorm right now anyways. Leila nods. But I don't want to impose. He smiles weakly and responds, Even after recent events, you still worry about something so trivial? If I thought you were imposing, I wouldn't have brought either of you here. She attempts to smile but winces at the pain in her mouth. Ezra gestures for the two women to take a seat on a black leather sofa. Leila examines her new surroundings while Haley picks at the hem of her dress. She must have been nervous. The living room therein has several vases full of lavender plants sitting around on various end tables. Now she knows where the scent comes from. A standard leather couch across from them. Ezra steps out the room, coming back minutes later with a cream in his hands. He states towards Haley, "If you'd like to rest, there is a guest room down the hall on the right. Feel free to use it as you see fit." This seems to ease her tension as she nods her head and stops picking at her short dress. She turns to Leila, who gives a small head bob, and she states, "I'm gonna go to bed then. Tonight has been hell." "That's what it's been," Leila finishes for her. Haley gives a small smile at her deadpan tone and agrees before she trots off to the guest room for the remainder of the night. Ezra grabs a stool and takes a seat in front of Leila, dabbing a finger in the clear cream. He holds his finger to her lip and states somberly, "This will hurt." Leila counters with a small huff. Surely not as bad as being hit in the face. Or tackled. That one hurt. He gives a small chuckle and dabs her bottom lip several times before he finished. Leila hisses at the pain and asks, "What the hell is this stuff?" Ezra answers firmly, "A concoction of herbs and plants. It's not your typical anti-infective cream." She grits her teeth at the intense pain and states, "This sucks." He smiles and responds, "I can show you to the second guest room if you'd like to rest." She nods. "Yes, please. I am exhausted." "As you should be." Ezra guides her down the very same hallway Haley had gone minutes prior, and turns the knob of a door on the far end of the corridor on the left. Leila's eyes can't help but to take in the walls first. The walls of the room are colored a deep shade of red, reminding her of arterial blood. There are no paintings or decorations on the walls, just the bloody red shade unnerving her. She quickly diverts her attention to the bed. It's large and plush, inviting her to sleep beneath the sea blue comforter. Ezra voices calmly, "If you need me, I'll be upstairs. Make yourself at home, Leila." Despite the situation, she can't help but to blush at the way he says her name. It's always with some sort of deeper, more meaningful tone, and she can't help but wonder if he is doing it on purpose. Surely he knows of his charms with all the women pining for him. She shakes her head, startled as the door closes behind her. She didn't hear him leave in the slightest. Leila sighs, taking her boots off and collapses onto the bed. It's as soft as she imagined. She snuggles beneath the blanket and soon drifts off to sleep. Leila stands there on the walkway towards her microbiology class, the clock tower beside her ringing in constant slow motion. A tanned man with cold red eyes and platinum hair stands before her. He reaches a hand out to contact her cheek. Leila finds herself unable to move away from his cool touch as he traces her face and slams her eyes shut, fear wrapping around her heart. He states callously as he pulls a strand of her loose hair, "I've found you at last." She's unable to say a word as he continues examining her, but she does notice a pair of fangs as she peeks an eye open. "I think I would enjoy sampling you now." Her heart beats rapidly against her chest wall. Whatever this man is planning, she wants no part of it. He states, void of any emotion, "You can either join me willingly or be pursued." She tries in vain to turn her head away and watches as a cruel grin comes across his face. "Oh, you can't move unless I will it, but you can speak." She spits immediately without regret. "Go away, you creep." As the words leave her mouth, the world before her turns black, and she jolts awake. She stares at her surroundings and finds herself back in the guest room at Ezra's home. She climbs out of bed and wipes the sleep from her eyes. A knock comes to her door, and she opens it sluggishly. Haley greets her with a smile and states, "We can go back to the dorm now. Ezra's getting ready." Leila yawns, covering her mouth. Haley questions lightly, "Rough time sleeping last night?" "I slept pretty great." "Yeah," she starts. "I had a really weird dream." Haley taps her shoulder and asks, "Want to talk about it?" She shakes her head lightly. "There's not much to really talk about." "Ladies." Ezra greets calmly, startling both women. Leila pipes up, "Hi Ezra. Thanks for letting us stay the night." "Of course. Would either of you care for breakfast?" At the mention of food both their stomachs growl and Haley replies happily, "That'd be great." He chuckles and looks to Leila, whose cheeks had reddened in embarrassment. Haley takes one of their hands and pulls them both forward. "Come on, you two can flirt later." Leila blushes and adamantly counters, "We're not. That's not what, God help me." Ezra says nothing to counter the argument and replies, "I did make breakfast already, so I hope you both enjoy." Haley takes a seat at the glass dining room table, followed by Leila and Ezra. He hands them both a plate, and Haley grabs helpings first. Leila takes her turn next, and Ezra gathers a small amount of food on his plate. It doesn't take them long to finish their breakfast before he asks, "Would you like to go to your car first or the dorm?" "The car. We need to pick it up." Haley answers calmly as she takes a sip of orange juice. Ezra nods and escorts the girls out of the house, everyone climbing into the car. They drive to where they left the SUV and find it parked by its lonesome. Ezra lets the two women out and states towards Leila, "I'll see you in class tomorrow then?" Leila bobs her head. She would see him the next day for class. For now she had the day to herself. Before she gets into the car, she states with gentle touch to his hand, "Thank you, Ezra, for everything." He pats her on the head and answers smoothly, "Of course, Leila." She blushes and quickly hops into the car, waving bye to the man. Haley smirks and states as she starts the engine, "Somebody likes you." Leila's cheeks redden further, and she counters swiftly as Haley drives, "I doubt it. Let's just go to the dorm." Haley smiles and answers as she puts the car into drive, "Sure." Chapter 9 A Million Thoughts. When they arrive at the dormitory, they both return to their room, and Leila collapses in bed. She's still tired despite her rest at Ezra's home. Leila buries her face under her pillow and exhales. "You going back to bed?" She groans from her spot, kicking her boots off until they land with a thud on the hard carpet flooring. She feels herself drifting off and soon passes out into another fitful sleep. Hours later, Leila wakes and finds herself needing a shower. She grabs a set of clothes from her dresser and goes to wash off, refreshing her body and mind. After dressing and throwing her hair into a ponytail, she exits the room with study materials, leaving Haley a brief note on her whereabouts for the day. Her destination is the library. She would use the remaining daylight to study microbiology and write in her stress diary. She hurries to the library and finds a spot in a quiet corner by herself. Pulling out her journal for stress management first, she begins to jot down her thoughts and most recent memories over the last day. Of all the things that had happened, she had least expected to be assaulted. Her first night out, and already she wanted to partake of the activity never again. Leila could have been in much worse shape if not for Haley finding aid in just the right amount of time. She wouldn't forget Ezra's help ever. She sighs. Then there's Ezra himself. Did she like the man? Of course she did. He was gentle and hospitable, friendly. There isn't anything to dislike about him. But her mind rounds back to that question once again. Did she like him? She can't tell. Some part of her still didn't trust the man, and she isn't without reason. She'd only known him for a few days now, and she found herself falling head over heels without any sort of guardrail to catch her. Leila shakes her head. And what about the dream she had? Sure. She could just chalk it all up to being merely that, a dream. What if it had some sort of meaning though? What if that man is real? What is he after besides her? She has nothing of value to offer. Nothing that she is aware of at the very least. Leila sighs again, standing from her spot and going to the local bagel shop down the hall. She orders a coffee and navigates her way back to her quiet corner, out of the eyes of curious students. She pulls out her microbiology book and flips through the beginning pages of the thick textbook. If only she had done the reading sooner. Now she has 3 chapters to catch up on. Glossing over the first words, she can feel her eyes closing slowly as the boredom quickly begins to set in. Leila was never the studying type, but she needed to if she wanted to pass the class. She didn't want to do this. She couldn't. Her brain is focused on many things, but microbiology is not one of them. Her shoulders rise and fall as she tries for another hour to read the pages before her. She does generate some progress, learning about key figures important to microbiology such as Louis Pasteur and Antony van Leeuwenhoek. Overall though, the process is slow, and ultimately she finds herself going back to her journal. Her pen touches the paper again as she scribbles more thoughts. Did she dare to write all of her last day's experiences in the notebook? No one but she and the coach would read it, but what if the assault is reported? Would she be okay with placing Haley and Ezra at the scene? Would she be fine with involving them with the police? She shakes her head. No, she wouldn't write them into the event. She would lie by omission. Not everyone needs to know what's going on with her life, so she writes about the club experience and how much she hated it and calls it a day after that. She also didn't dare to mention spending the night at a teacher's home. Leila can already feel the redness in her cheeks at the mere thought of writing about it. Slamming the journal closed, she gathers her things and finds herself wandering around the campus. She isn't quite ready to return to the dorm, but she also has nowhere to go. Her feet carry her to the bell tower where her dream had taken place. She climbs up on the wall and takes a seat, laying on the wide concrete, staring at the sky as students pass by. She stays that way until night falls, and fewer students are flitting about the campus. Leila rises and jumps down from her spot, landing quietly on her feet. She notices a man standing there, platinum hair glowing in the night. Her breath hitches. He turns to her, and red eyes flicker venomously over her frame. He smirks and states, "I see you came to me this time, Weapon." Leila rotates on her heels and shakes her head. "Sorry, wrong person, sir." Before she can take the route of escape, he reaches for her wrist and yanks her to him, pulling her into his chest. He whispers coldly into her ear. Now, do you think I honestly forgot about last night?" The words echo through her mind. She asks, dumbfounded. "The dream?" He clicks his tongue and states, ice in his tone. "You escaped me last night, Weapon. Tonight will not be the same." Without missing a beat, a voice calls, "Leila, is that you? Are you cheating on Ezra already? You haven't even hooked up yet." If not for her current predicament, her cheeks would be on fire. Instead, all she can feel is relief as Haley comes to her aid, grabbing her hand and remarking towards the strange man, "Sorry, but she's taken so buzz off." With that, Leila is tugged away from the scene and dragged to the dorm in a haze. Once they arrive, Haley drops her hand and frowns. "You really have a nasty habit with meeting these creeps, Leila." All she can do is hug the girl and whisper quietly, "Thank you for the rescue." Haley shrugs. "No problem, but next time I'm telling Ezra." "Who was that guy anyways?" She answers weakly, "I'm not sure." Haley hugs the older roommate one last time and replies, "Well, get some rest and maybe a shower to relax. I have to study for a quiz tomorrow." Leila chuckles. "Sure thing, Mom." The two girls head their separate ways, and Leila spends the rest of the evening locked away in her room. One question enters her mind. Why did he call her a weapon? Chapter 10, Lady in Red. A woman with her back turned to Leila stands there in a dirted red dress. Leila stares at the crying figure, unsure of what to do. She calls out from her spot, Hello." She receives no response from the brunette other than more uncontrolled sobbing. Leila's eyes narrow. She is clearly having another dream of sorts, and she wants nothing to do with it. Leila rotates on her heels, but the woman stands right there in front of her, eyes gauged out. She startles at the sight and takes a step back from the entity. A pale hand reaches out from her side and grasps Leila's shoulder. She's unable to move, struck with fear. She can't handle another one of these nightmares. The woman opens her mouth and begins wailing a high-pitched scream. Leila wishes she can cover her ears at the intense noise and feels her ears ringing as the screaming continues. She growls at the incessant sound and snaps bitterly, "All I wanted was some sleep, damn it." The woman doesn't relent in her yelling, and Leila closes her eyes, trying her best to block out the noise, and replies, "Go away." Just like that, the spirit vanishes before her eyes, and she's free to move. She inhales a large breath and gasps as the entity is back with an angry appearance to its features. The woman screams again, but this time Leila can make out the words, "Wake up." She jolts at the reaction and falls off her bed, hitting her head as she stands. She glowers over her shoulder and quips, I'm up. Who the hell screams that long?" Leila looks at her phone and notices the time. Not only has she missed microbiology, sleeping through the day, but she's late for her violin class. She grabs her instrument and bolts out the door, running across the campus to the ball hall. She rushes up 2 flights of stairs, finally in front of the violin classroom. Leila pushes the door open, breaths heavy as she enters, and finds herself flustered by all of the eyes watching as she takes her seat. Ezra continues the lesson, though, as if she hadn't interrupted at all, and for that, she is grateful. He can hear footsteps rushing up the stairs. It had to be her. She's late for class, and as if on cue, the door bursts open with a disheveled Leila entering. She takes her seat, but he doesn't halt the lesson to address her tardiness. Instead, he continues teaching the major scale to the students. He glances over at Leila as he has them practice on their violins. Her hair is a complete mess in a loosely thrown-up bun. She's wearing a black jacket that looks like it's ready to fall from her frame because it's so poorly placed. She must not have slept well. It's a stark contrast to the well-kept woman he is used to seeing over the last few days. He watches each student with a careful gaze and approaches Megan. Her eyes turn toward him in confusion, and he states as he shows her with his own violin the proper way to hold the bow. "Try not to touch the hairs and don't keep your fingers too close together." She quickly nods her head, flustered by the ordeal. She questions, "Professor, I thought there was a late policy? No entrance into the class once you're late or something like that." Annoyance brims behind those smiling eyes as he answers, "Focus on yourself, Megan." He watches the heavy sigh and jealousy flicker through her eyes and turns away. Glancing over at Leila, he can see that she is still exhausted. Upon further inspection of her frame without her noticing his lingering gaze, he can see the reason why. A red orb floats around her, flitting back and forth. He watches as it takes form into a woman in red. Her long brunette locks float about her. A hand reaches out to Leila's shoulder and grasps firmly. Leila doesn't react to the touch, but then the entity begins screaming. This causes Leila to startle awake as she had dozed off with the violin and bow in her hands. Ezra approaches the woman and places a hand on her shoulder where the banshee had her hand, and he glares at the creature as her brows furrow in anger. Her gauged-out eyes turn his way, but upon sensing the aura he is exuding, she quickly disperses into the air, leaving Leila alone. Leila questions, "Is everything all right?" Ezra stares at the woman and counters smoothly, "I should be asking you that." She blushes, something that doesn't go unnoticed by the vampire, and replies hastily, "I'm fine." It's an obvious lie, but he doesn't counter her any further. He turns back to the class and stands at the podium, watching until another student needs assistance with their instrument. This goes on for about an hour when he finally calls time for the lesson. Leila packs her things, but before she can leave, Ezra approaches her and firmly states, "Let me walk you to your dorm." She shakes her head lightly, but he is having none of it. Not only is she being plagued by a vengeful spirit, but he can also sense Ryu nearby. The vampire lord can shape-shift into whatever form he pleases, and Ezra will not have Leila walking to her dorm alone anymore, especially at night. "I'm not asking, Leila," he responds to her head shaking. He picks up her things for her and turns with his back facing her, bent down. Ezra orders calmly, "Climb on." She hesitates and states, "Really, I can walk." He sighs, running a hand through his black locks, frustrated with the woman, but he gives her a small smile. "Sorry," she quickly apologizes. Had he shown his aggravation to her? No, he's certain she's just apologizing out of politeness. Ezra shakes his head and states, "I won't make you, but you do need to rest." "I know, but why are you walking me to my dorm?" she asks. He answers honestly, "It's safer." She doesn't argue with him about it. They leave the room together, Ezra turning the lights out and locking the door behind him. He follows after Leila and states, "You missed a quiz today in microbiology." He notices the frown across her face and she groans, "I'm gonna fail the class at this rate." Ezra chuckles at her disposition, and she shoots him a warning glare. This only causes him to laugh more, and he states gently, "I will tutor you if you'd like." Her shoulders fall in relief and she nods her head. "That would be appreciated." He nods but notices the red orb floating around her once more. He swats at it like a fly, and she tilts her head, curiosity going through those eyes. "What is it?" "Nothing, just a pest." She yawns. "If you say so." He grabs her hand, and pulls her in a different direction towards her dorm, away from the woman in red. He notices the redness in her cheeks as she speaks up. "But it's quicker that way." He stops, Leila colliding into his back and states, "Trust me." Her lips purse and she asks, "Sure, but is something wrong?" Ezra continues guiding her until they reach the front entrance of the dormitory, swatting at the red orb every time it approaches. He's thankful Leila doesn't question his actions any further as they get to her dorm room. Leila unlocks the door and states, inviting him in, "You can come inside if you'd like." Ezra shakes his head. "That's quite all right. Go get some rest." As soon as she shuts the door, he walks off, taking a breath and glaring at the red orb as it forms into the shapely woman. He snips irritable and cold, "Don't come near her anymore, Banshee." She heeds little attention to the warning and reaches a hand through the door. Ezra grasps her wrist and twists it. She screams, but this causes him to glare at her. He places a hand to her chest. Eyes glowing red as ice begins to sprout from the origin of his palm until the Banshee is completely encased in ice. An agonizing scream erupts from the woman, but Ezra is having none of it. He closes his fist and punches the ice, the Banshee disintegrating along with the casing into thin air. He huffs and turns on his heels, casting a glance at Leila's dorm door one last time for the evening before he makes haste to his car. Chapter 11, Real Deal. He drives to his home and goes upstairs to his room immediately. Ezra taps on a large glass mirror, and it ripples to life, displaying the vampire lord on the other side. "Ryu is here, my lord." The lord frowns, lightly nudging away two of his concubines, and he responds, "And what of the weapon?" Ezra answers calmly, "Safe for now." "Does it know anything?" Ezra's lips purse. He didn't like referring to Leila as an object. He had watched over her for 20 years. Calling her an it seems rude. She had become more than a random weapon to use to him. You seem displeased, the vampire lord calls out. Ezra runs a hand through his hair and exhales, turning and removing his black button-up shirt. Scars mar his pale skin. He states as he changes into a comfortable t-shirt. She doesn't know a thing, but it won't be long before she finds out. Your brother undoubtedly makes moves as we speak. Ah, you care for this one. He points out matter-of-factly. Ezra turns back towards the mirror and replies. You've had me watch her for 2 decades now. How am I supposed to react, my lord? Please, Ezra, speak freely to me. Do I need to pull you out, or can you handle this? He asks firmly, wanting to know if his most trusted ally could really take on such a task. I've handled it for 20 years. Now is hardly the time to be concerned. Yes, but she has matured. I cannot afford for you to grow feelings for her, and become blinded by those emotions. Ezra swiftly counters. I would hardly be swayed so easily, but she is fascinating to say the least. A lie to the Lord, but it's a necessary one. He had already grown fond of the woman. He would lay his life down on the line for her if it meant she lived, but if the Lord knew that. Ezra shakes his head. Something the matter? He stares at the vampire and answers with a huff. No, my lord. Besides Ryu, is there anything else you need to report? She's plagued by spirits. He smirks and responds. Oh? She's a special one indeed then. Normally the dead aren't attracted to the weapon. Her blood must be exquisite. Ezra frowns. You wish to sample it for yourself? If she were to allow it, yes. He pinches the bridge of his nose in frustration with the vampire lord and states as he disables the connection. I'm going, my lord. Ezra can hear the chuckle from the older vampire as his image fades from the mirror. He lies down in bed and sighs, a frown painted on his face. He's a vampire. Vampires shouldn't be sleeping at night, but he has to play the role of college student and professor. Functioning on a human schedule aggravates him to no end, but he would play along for the time being. He closes his eyes with a heavy huff, and soon sleep engulfs him. Ezra sits in a lone chair enveloped by darkness, hands tied behind him. His eyes scan the figure before him, and he sucks in a breath. Blue lingerie flashes in front of him. This is not the kind of thing he needs in his moment of rest. Gentle hands trace the scars on his pale flesh, his eyes flickering between red and amethyst with each warm touch to his naturally cool body. He replies with a huff. Concubine, I suggest you stop. She looks up with those familiar honey-brown eyes and whispers, My lord desires this. Ezra scowls. He didn't like the title. Technically all of the vampires of the council are lords and ladies, but there is one above the rest, the true lord. They were the head of everything regarding the vampire society. A soft kiss is placed on his neck. His eyes narrow as he remembers the restraints and he snaps bitterly. Someone has clearly done their homework. The concubine kisses his collarbone and questions, Is my lord satisfied? He scoffs, breaking his constraints and answering as he grabs the woman by the hair, pulling her close. Hardly. If you're going to play this game, then do it right. The brunette stiffens in his grasp and replies hesitantly, Yes, my lord. Should I continue in this form, or would my lord prefer something different? Ezra frowns. He releases her, realizing he still had hold of her hair and grasps her tanned hand, pulling her onto his lap. She knew how to entice him with looks alone. She had shape-shifted into Leila's form, and she sits there in his lap. The woman attempts to move, but Ezra applies pressure to her hip and responds coldly, You stay. Yes, my lord. He swiftly counters, If you're going to play Leila, then stop calling me that. Use my name. She stutters, Yes, Ezra. Hearing his name roll off her lips stirs a monster inside him. His eyes flicker red once more. It did unspeakable things to him, but he wouldn't dare show her in real life. Again. He commands lowly. Yes, Ezra. His hold on her tightens, claws elongating and digging into her sides. She winces and his red eyes meet her honey-brown ones. This isn't the real deal. He knows that much. He tips her head to the side, revealing her neck. His fangs lengthen, and he clamps down onto her jugular, drinking his fill until the concubine is unconscious. He drops her to the floor and scowls, closing his eyes. He was over it. Ezra's body and mind wake to the surroundings about him, claws and fangs returning to their original positions. He growls as he gets out of bed, tossing an empty glass vase into a wall and shattering it. It's day and light shines through his bedroom window. He slams the black curtain shut, not wanting anything to do with the day and its inhabitants. Ezra glances at the clock on his nightstand beside his lavish bed, reading the time. 0645. He has roughly over an hour to get ready for class and work and be on his way. He runs a hand through his short black locks, ruffled with the lucid dream. He knows it was the vampire lord who sent the concubine. Only the true lord would do that to him and get away with it. Ezra would have his head otherwise. Ezra exhales. It's time to get ready for the day and hope that Leila's night was less eventful than his own.